Hey, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joe Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
A few years ago, my cousin told me something. My guy cousin told me that I don't know how to talk to kids. And I was really offended by this. I was like, what are you talking about on how to talk to kids? I worked with kids most of my life. I grew up in my parents' youth ministry. And I was really at first offended by this concept. But I really thought about it for a while. And the reason he said it to me is often when I'm around children, I talk to them like they're adults. I don't necessarily do, and I kind of have an ethic around not going, oh, we do, talking like baby talk to kids. Like even if it's like a 2-year-old, I'd be like, hey, what's up, man? Like, give me a fist bump, whatever. I'll just like talk directly to the child or the toddler in whatever way. And sometimes I will, I'm like, if I'm talking to a kid, I'm not like censoring my speech to be very careful to not be maybe with speech that could be seen from a child's perspective as harsh. I'm not trying to be mean to kids, but I just was like, I wasn't being careful. But then I remember about 6 months after my cousin told me this is many years ago, I watched the replay of Mr. Rogers, who was sitting back in, I think it was the 1970s or 80s in Congress in the United States, maybe the 1960s actually, late 60s, when he was trying to push for funding for public television. And he was basically appealing to the government to say, hey, this is important for people in the world. Like public television is important. And they were like, we're going to cut funding for this. And he went on to explain how important it was. If you've never seen this video, it's an incredible video. I mean, it's just a really captivating, evocative video for me. And as I watched it, I remember by the end of it, I was crying. I was actually in tears. And some of the government people there were moved emotionally. And when Mr. Rogers said something about children, he talked about how children don't need television programming with guns or violence. And I think he even used the term bopping people on the head. They have enough drama in their childhood already. Like their childhood is filled with figuring out this new body, this new mind, this growing up experience. Something happened in that moment. My intuition must have connected the dots. And instantly I realized, this probably was what my cousin was trying to illustrate to me is kids don't need any adult drama brought into their life. They've got enough drama already. And so when I speak to them as I would speak to an adult, I have to still be mindful that this child has drama that they're dealing with that I don't necessarily consider because I've already transcended that drama, right? I'm an adult. I don't have to worry about all the little kid stuff and all the little kid insecurities that these children might have. And it was Mr. Rogers articulating this in a way that really struck me at the core of my being. And I began to see and speak and behave around children differently with much more compassion to maybe I'm sure having my own kids helped me with this too, helped me understand, they're going through a lot of their own internal drama. It's been very impactful. That literally, even my 11-year-old the other day had some issues and some drama come up that I thought was kind of, from my perspective as a grown man, was silly. And I remembered Mr. Rogers' statement in that video, like he's going through his drama that's important to him. It's his experience. He's not at your level yet. He doesn't need any extra put into there. He's experiencing what he's experiencing. Opened up a whole world to me of seeing things in a different way. It changed my perspective. Now, I believe that Mr. Rogers, I never met him in person. He's now passed away. We kind of have a rule here that we don't really say what we think somebody's personality type is, if they're a celebrity or somebody officially, because we just don't know. We haven't met them. And I'm going to break one of our rules here for the sake of illustration. I believe that from my anecdotal, just looking at him, I believe Mr. Rogers is probably an ISFJ in the Myers-Briggs system, meaning he's using the harmony, extroverted feeling, or FE function as his decision-making criteria. And it has been really powerful for me to get a good expression of extroverted feeling and watching him. Now, whether he is that type or not, I believe at least he's using language and pointing us to this type of thinking that this function uses. So regardless of his type, if you have a disagreement with that, I'm not going to die on that hill. I don't care that much. But it's illustrative to the point I'm trying to make in that I think, and this is what we're going to talk about today, there's a lot of wisdom that extroverted feeling and harmony bring to us in our world. And certainly I look at this moment in my life, in my adult life, where I was going down a road of, I don't believe I was being deliberately harmful, but I just was being cavalier. I was being callous and not careful with how I approached something. And it took somebody that uses, or at least pointed to things that harmony or extroverted feeling would do to change me. It recalibrated me, I need to for the sake of compassion and connection, change how I do something for my fellow human. And in this case, it was children in particular. And that spoke to me greatly. So I encourage you to go watch that video as we start to talk about this. I think that's a really interesting video to see Mr. Rogers do that. And if you don't know who Mr. Rogers is, by the way, if you're from another country outside of the United States, just in case, Mr. Rogers was a public television personality here in the United States in the 1970s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, I think into the 1990s. He did a daily television program called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, where he would talk to the camera, assuming a child was at home watching a television set. He would talk to them and come down to their level and talk to them about the issues they were having in their life and all the drama and traumas they had. And he helped work them through that. And as a little child, I remember watching him as a little kid. Most children in the United States in that time period watched him every morning and would, go into his land of make-believe. He would talk about issues children struggle with. It was a beautiful program, television program for children that I think impacted a lot of kids' lives for the better.
And we're talking about Mr. Rogers because we're actually talking about extroverted feeling or harmony, as Joel mentioned, because we're continuing on with our series of why the world needs each of these cognitive functions. And Mr. Rogers is one of my favorite examples of somebody who used, we keep talking about him in the present. Unfortunately, he died quite a few years ago, but he's a beautiful example of somebody who used this process to impact many, many, many people's lives. He primarily spoke to children, and you can tell that he was very cognizant and aware of what their specific needs were, which is a superpower of the function of harmony or of extroverted feeling. That's all about understanding the systems of people. Now, I have this as my tertiary or my 10-year-old function in my car, and I got to admit, I've had a push-pull relationship with it. Like sometimes I love extroverted feeling or harmony, and sometimes I hate extroverted feeling or harmony. And you don't have it at all in your car or in your stack, Joel. So a lot of what you've experienced with this function is with relationships with people in your lives and your relationship with me and when I'm using it. And of course, I've had a deep relationship with it because it's something that I've started to really work on, right? Like in my older age, I'm now in my 40s, and right now I'm going through a very extroverted feeling or harmony time period for myself, really trying to develop this function. And it's for those of us who are perceivers, and actually this is sort of a known phenomenon in type communities. It is not uncommon for people, particularly perceivers, to come on and complain about this function. It's very common. I think it's especially with people who use introverted feeling or authenticity. FPs have a hard time with the harmony process. And I think sometimes it's hard to defend it because when harmony is doing the right thing, that's a loaded way of saying it. When harmony is at its best, you almost don't see it. And so when people think they don't like the harmony function or extroverted feeling function, when they think they don't like it, it's often because they have benefited from it silently. They've benefited from it in ways that they can't articulate or even recognize sometimes. And so all they see is the times they don't like it. They only observe the moments in which it feels like it's clashing with who they are and their identity. That's the challenge with harmony or extroverted feeling if you use this function, is that when you're doing it the best, you're getting people's needs met. When you're getting people's needs met, they're at a space of equilibrium, right? They're at homeostasis. When you're at homeostasis, you're not really recognizing that much stuff around you because it's just being taken care of, right? It's just sort of happening around you. You don't really see it. So one of the challenges is people who have this as a function, right? Particularly as a driver or co-pilot in the car model, one of the challenges is that they get taken for granted a lot. And then all of a sudden somebody's coming at them and they're like, what did I do? I didn't do anything. I've been working for you. I've been doing all this stuff around you. And the one time I did something you didn't like, now you're saying that you don't like me as a person. You don't like my function at all. Like everybody who's an FJ is a bad person because like this one thing you didn't like, but look at all the good stuff we do. And it can be a struggle for people to really recognize all the good stuff they do because it's so silent. It just happens around them.
It's probably the least thanked process. Like, I'm kind of isolating the cognitive function, extroverted feeling harmony. It probably receives the least amount of gratitude directly because, like you said, we only notice it when it's not operating or when it's not meeting the needs of people around it, or there's a connection that's been broken, or there's conflict. We see it jump in those moments, but we don't realize just how much undercurrent is running all the time to keep things in homeostasis, like you said. So I would absolutely say it is the least thanked of all the functions. It is the least, like, obviously honored. And I think that's why we have a lot of mechanisms built in to honor it, probably. Like there's a lot of ways we try to mark in culture, I think, to try to thank this for showing up to us. We have a lot of like support recognition days that we create as a culture, at least here in the United States. Like we've got Mother's Day, Father's Day, Secretary's Day, like these different like kind of support roles that FE takes on to honor it. And I think that we build that in because it's just so not thanked as much as we probably should be doing that.
Well, I think it does get thanked a lot, but I think the word was honored.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of like, thanks mom, thanks dad, thanks blah, blah, blah. Like there's a lot of these little like sort of throwaway thanks. And it's easy to thank somebody who just did something for you that you recognize. Like, I didn't have a sandwich before, and now suddenly I have a sandwich, right? Like, thanks for bringing me a sandwich.
But that's like a task, right? Like,
right, exactly. It's like that's the thing that you're supposed to do. It's transactional, and you don't want to be, you don't want to be a jerk who doesn't thank somebody for bringing you something. But I think that the ways in which it shows up are very, like the rewards we get are very abstract. Unlike maybe some of the other functions where the rewards are very obvious and tangible right in front of us, the reward that FE gives us, or the gifts it gives us, are more abstract. It's like a feeling of well-being, or a sense of morale, or something that's kind of an abstraction or a positive. And good extroverted feeling or harmony doesn't always give a sense of well-being in the moment. Sometimes it's taking umbrage with something. Sometimes it's playing a longer game of getting needs met by pointing something out that's going wrong, or, being willing to create conflict in order to get through conflict and have true harmony on the other side. Those are the moments in which sometimes people don't believe that, like the extroverted feeling or harmony function is doing as much good as it should be, because all the good stuff it did just gave sort of a sense of well-being, and then now all of a sudden it feels like they're creating conflict, so they must be doing something bad or wrong. When I said that if it's being done really well, you don't see it, that's a little bit of a misnomer. There are moments when extroverted feeling or harmony is showing up in a very positive way that doesn't feel particularly good. I mean, think about this in almost the metaphor of medicine, right? Like in a medical context, if somebody has a broken limb, like in order to fix the limb, you have to reset it, which is an incredibly painful process. And that's the only way that patient is going to get their ultimate need met of of a straight limb. Otherwise it'll be crooked for the rest of their life, and they might even have infections, and it might kill them. So extroverted feeling or harmony, if we're going to use that as a metaphor, sometimes it has to reset a limb. Sometimes it has to identify when something is broken, or something is diseased, or something is going off the rails. And in order to get the person, or get maybe sometimes even culture on track, it has to reset it. And that can feel like a very violent process. Now, most of the time, extroverted feeling or harmony is focused on the people whose needs are going unmet the most. That's oftentimes like who's the person who has the most needs going unmet. That's usually where it focuses on. It might not have a huge territory. It might not have a global territory it's taking in. So it's basically whoever is the person who has the most unmet needs in whatever territory that person is, the individual harmony user is taking in. So that could be in their family, it could be in their circle of friends, it could be in their community, it could be in their state or province, or it could be globally, all over the world, depending on how much territory that individual person is taking in. The larger the frame, the more they're going to be seeking those who really have a lot of unmet needs. They're going to be very compassionate usually, and they're looking for the people who really need help, really, truly, authentically need a lot of eyeballs and a lot of attention put on them. You can see this right now on social media. There's something that's happening right now in the United States that's very disturbing to a lot of people. I'm not going to mention it because I don't want to date this particular podcast, but at any given time, there's something happening in the United States or in the country that you might live in that is disturbing to a lot of people. And so there's a lot of social media shares going on right now. And almost everybody that I know that's sharing this is somebody who's using Harmony or Extraverted Feeling. It's very, very disturbing to them. And so, and that's all across the board, all ages, all genders, it doesn't matter. They're the people who are most sharing this. And I think it's because it's so distressing to them. It's so distressing that these needs are just piling up and stacking up and nobody's doing anything about it. And so one of the things they're trying to do to implement a strategy for paying attention is by sharing it and getting it into the collective unconscious, to get it into everybody's minds, which is something that Extraverted Feeling or Harmony does extremely well. It basically is the province of idea viruses, right? And we talk about the polarities. Extroverted Feeling or Harmony's other side of its polarity is introverted thinking or accuracy, which is the idea of what we should be thinking. So Extroverted Feeling gets really good at connecting to a matrix, a connected matrix of people, and taking ideas, usually one powerful idea, and blasting it out to the rest of the matrix. And that's basically an idea virus. Now, idea viruses oftentimes get a bad rap, right? Oh, that's just an idea virus. And some of them are dangerous. Some idea viruses are dangerous, but some of them are simply what we would call at this point in history memes, right? Memes that get passed around amongst huge groups of people. Extroverted Feeling or Harmony is very good at understanding and leveraging memes. And so because of that, we become aware of things that maybe we were never aware of before, because it's gotten so good at basically infecting us with these new concepts and new thoughts, things that maybe we just weren't aware of before. And if they take in enough territory and decide that's something that should be in the collective unconscious or in the public awareness, because there's something really bad that needs to be reset, something that's broken, then that is a function that does that extremely well. And we all benefit from it. We really do, because over time, as we become more and more aware of these things, we then it's insinuated to us and we become persuaded to take our attention and our resource and focus on it. And so then we end up having a rising tide raises all ships situation. We end up having this we end up realizing that we can't just allow a rising tide raises all ships situation. We also can't neglect the people at the bottom. We can't neglect the people whose needs are going perpetually unmet. If we only focus on the powerful and on the already successful, which, by the way, I do believe there's merit in there. But if we do that perpetually at the cost of people whose needs are going unmet, then we will have an anchor around us. We will only be able to get so high because the anchor of the people who we are neglecting pulls the rest of humanity down. And I think Extroverted Feeling or Harmony is good at understanding that principle on a small level, like in the family. Who's the person who's the saddest right now? Who's the person who's the most upset? Who's the person who's hangry, right? They need food because they're just going crazy. All of that is going to disrupt the entire household. Until we get that person's need met, everybody in the household is going to feel it. So let's focus on this person, get their needs met, get them in a good space, and then everybody benefits from it. So take this principle from the home and now expand it to whatever, how big a territory you want to expand it to, potentially all of humanity. Who's the person who has the needs going unmet? That's going to actually disrupt all of us. All of us are going to be disrupted in the human matrix when that persists. And so pouring attention to that, getting people to understand and appreciate it, getting people to understand what the real needs are, that's one of the beautiful things that Harmony brings.
I'm grateful for the Harmony process. You said that introverted feeling authenticity people like myself, I'm an ENFP in the Myers-Briggs system, sometimes have a little issue with Harmony. And I've struggled at times because sometimes I always wonder, is this Harmony person doing this because they want to do it intrinsically, or are they doing it because I want them to do it? And I always second guess myself, or second guess the motivations, right? But I realize that Harmony genuinely does appreciate meeting the needs of others, as long as the balance isn't so skewed to where they give endlessly and there's never a return on value. I think there is I wouldn't say a transactional element, but there is a reciprocal element to extroverted feeling or harmony. And that there's an expectation that, okay, I'm going to give a little here, and then you're going to give a little over here, and we're going to be equal, over time. That's the expectation. I think that's one of the benefits they bring. I think extroverted feeling, harmony process, is tapped into this reciprocal nature of human dynamics, this notion that no one can give endlessly. No one can meet needs endlessly. None of us can show up and continually sacrifice without something feeding back to us. And I think extroverted feeling does a really good job at illustrating that to us, living that out in a lot of ways. The reciprocal nature of human dynamics. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned by watching extroverted feeling and the harmony process in that. The other piece that I'm just incredibly grateful for extroverted feeling and harmony is the ability for true conflict resolution. This idea of like genuinely meeting the needs. You talked about with the kind of the broken leg concept. Sometimes when harmony is meeting the genuine need, it doesn't feel like they're making things feel better. And it's been my experience that mature extroverted feeling users or harmony users, they're really good at meeting the need that's the actual need, not the surface emotional need. Like the emotion is the emergent of the actual structural need or the under need of all of it. And that is really powerful too, because, I'm not wired that way necessarily to see how those needs play into things. And so I'm really grateful for the light that extroverted feeling or harmony can shine on some of that. The other thing I think of is prioritization. Like I tend to not be good at prioritizing what needs to come first. I'm using a whole different function set. Mine's probably going to be more around like getting the job done because I've got that extroverted thinking side of me and the introverted feeling, and I'm trying to get things accomplished. But extroverted feeling reminds me, harmony reminds me, like there's a priority to doing things. There's a priority, and people need to come first. Now, I have a tendency to honor the individual as an introverted feeling person, but the people and their experience, their emotional experience, not just their like personhood, but like how they're experiencing this right now in the moment, not what it means about who they are, but their actual experience of what's going on is very illustrative to me to see what harmony's focused on. And then the priority of like which one comes first. An example of this is we were recently in the middle of kind of a traumatic experience in the last month or so. It was like a really bad situation we're in the middle of. And you and I were like, what do we do in this situation? We were tired. We were under-resourced. There was some drama and some hardship. And there was a ENFJ, extroverted feeling harmony driver in our sphere. And she was basically saying, okay, calm down, guys. Let me show you kind of what's going on here in people's system. And she started to help us prioritize what we needed to focus on first, second, and onward, to understand how to move through meeting the needs in a way that would actually solve the problem, not just make everybody feel better. And it was really powerful for me to have her help me prioritize that list of things we should be doing. And I just had a massive gratitude moment in there going, this is what harmony does really well. This is such a superpower of harmony, knowing exactly what to do when the S hits the fan and you're like, oh no, like all this destabilization everywhere. What do we do first? How do we meet needs? How do we make sure everybody feels good and feels comfortable with this and we don't make a bigger problem? And this person just walked us through it so beautifully. So there's so many good things this brings. And again, I think the thing is it's like fish in water. It's so hard to see because civilization, in my opinion, I think it's built off both extroverted judging functions. But the people part, the human connection part, not the structural part like for extroverted thinking, but the extroverted feeling harmony piece is the binding agent between us as humans. It's the connection point between us. And because it's so pervasive in our experience, it's like a fish in water. It's the water we swim in. It's the experience we're in the middle of that it's hard to get a sense of. Sometimes it's, especially if you don't use it, it's hard to get a sense of how that's showing up all the time. And it's just operating so beautifully under the surface often that we tend to marginalize this function, or people that use it, or we tend to not be as grateful, or we tend to not realize all the gifts they're bringing and all the gifts this function brings because it's so baked into all of our human interactions at the core level of who we are.
Yeah, you mentioned that sometimes you question whether or not it's honest for the person. Like is it really like you question their motives or intent?
Probably my mom, INFJ, made me feel this way, watching her be a martyr for so many things.
Yeah, and I think there can be that. I think that's one of the challenges that extroverted feeling or harmony has is over sacrificing themselves and allowing themselves to become a martyr. I think that's one of the moments that other types look at them as that's one of the obvious behaviors that ends up becoming distasteful to other types. And at the same time, you realize, because I also use extroverted feeling or harmony, that when I show up in that way and you've asked that question, do I really want to be doing this? The answer that you've come to is even if it doesn't really feel like it would be a authentic thing, like I wouldn't have done it without the prompting of the world around me encouraging me to do it. Like clearly needs are going unmet and clearly they need to be met. Or I just like doing things that make other people happy. Like I think that's one of the nicest qualities about extroverted feeling or harmony is it just likes making other people happy usually. I mean, if it's healthy. When we talk about this idea of why the world needs a certain function, just make the assumption that we're talking about the healthy version. And all of these functions have unhealthy expressions to them, or people use them in unhealthy ways. They're tools that are used in unhealthy ways. And so the function itself is a neutral, and how we individually use them and the health of us as individuals really colors our experience with them and how people will be experiencing us. But most of the time, extroverted feeling or harmony gets a high out of making other people feel good. And I think you sort of realize that at a certain point. You realize that
it is authentic to make somebody feel good.
It's honest.
Yeah. I mean, I would say authentic because I use introverted feeling, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even if it's not quote unquote authentic, as in it's like an authentic expression of the individual person, like they might not have unprompted done this thing, it's still an honest behavior. It's not necessarily meant to be something that is manipulative.
Well, it's responsive, not proactive. So, I mean, it can be proactive, but often it's responsive to a need.
Yeah, exactly. And so it wouldn't have happened without the catalyst. And it's honest to want to respond to the catalyst and make something good happen. One thing I noticed just now, too, as we were talking about the function, you censored yourself. You said the S hits the fan. And we don't often censor the word shit. And I'm not censoring it right now. So if I just did a disservice to your censoring, I apologize. But I find it interesting that we don't usually censor that word. But in the Harmony podcast, you did.
That is interesting. I didn't even realize that. You're right.
And it's because I think harmony is also where these social contracts live. And there is a percentage of our audience that has given us feedback that they would appreciate it if we didn't swear at all so they could share the podcast with their kids. And I do have extroverted feeling or harmony as my 10-year-old. And so when I hear that, I go, oh, maybe we should do that. But my accuracy or introverted thinking comes up and goes, it's not honest for us. Like, it's almost like I use a little peppering in of swearing. To vet the people who are listening to us, because we're going to actually be introducing ideas that are triggering to a lot of people. So the swearing is part of almost warning them.
If you can't take this, you're probably not going to take the ideas we're going to give you.
Yeah, because sometimes we do have a little bit of seditious ideas that we implant into the podcast. That said, extroverted feeling or harmony, that part of me goes, but we can't swear too much, because I actually swear like a sailor most of the time. You like the podcast listeners get I don't know, 10%, 20% of how I usually swear. There's just a tip of the iceberg. So there's a part of me that goes, well, I have to pepper in just enough of it to be honest, to let people know that this is not all like rainbows and bunnies. But I'm not going to do too much, because I don't want to completely disqualify people from being able to listen to the podcast if it's like truly offensive to them. And so that's one of the gifts that extroverted feeling or harmony is given to me, is it throttles my introverted thinking or accuracy. It throttles it to not be too offensive. Like, I'm able to communicate ideas to other people because there's a part of me that goes, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's just how humans are. So maybe infuse a little love into this.
So you're able to kind of get a sense from your harmony extroverted feeling process of how this will land with the other.
Yeah, and that I need to be a person of compassion. And I think that's maybe my favorite thing about the harmony process. I actually even wrote a tweet about this not that long ago. I'm going to read my own tweet on my own podcast. I don't even know what this means self-referentially. The tweet I wrote was, what I love about FE or harmony, extroverted feeling, is it reminds me that love is the bonding agent of the universe. Sometimes we don't always get right how to keep bonds tight, but as harmony matures, it gets great at knowing when to speak, when to let things go, when to take the hit, and when to enforce boundaries. It wants us to stay in connection. It wants us to be in love with each other. Not in love in an eros way, not in love in like a romantic way, but in the space of love. It's the connective force that glues us all together. If we're going to be in connection, we have to be in love. Because the opposite, that discord, right? The thing that pushes us away, which is either, well, I don't think hatred does it. I think apathy does it. Apathy has it so that we don't care if that person's in our sphere or not. They can just go wherever they go and we don't care. Love is what makes us want to stay with the person and keep them close. And that's how we create a social matrix of humanity, is that we're all connected to somebody who loves us, right? That whole concept of 7 degrees of separation. Every human being has 7 degrees of separation. But the 7 degrees of separation, every person that's in that separation is actually connected to somebody. Now, of course, that's just knowing somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. But I wouldn't be surprised if we've got that level of connectivity based on the people that we love. We love this person, and so we keep them close, but then they love this other person, and they keep that person close, and then that third person loves somebody else and keeps them close. And so really, we all get to be one huge human family based on all these connections of love. And then if you take this one step, I know I'm getting kind of abstract here, but if you take this one step further, it doesn't have to be about filial love or friendship love. It can be about agape or principled love. It can be about the kind of love that we have for humanity just because it exists. And so harmony or extroverted feeling is, in my opinion, where we go to show and experience and keep love tight. It's where we have that bond, that glue of humanity. And I don't know, what on earth would we be without it? It's almost the backbone of what humanity is. Like, we do other things, like we build stuff, and we do other things like invent stuff, and we do other things like experience stuff. But what really keeps us human a lot of times is our humanity, and our humanity is oftentimes illustrated in those moments when somebody's self-sacrificing or when somebody does something that reminds us what it means to really be a part of this matrix, this whole glued system together. And I think that's one of the reasons why I feel like, the world absolutely needs healthy, good harmony.
I think the etymology of harmony, extroverted feeling, whether this is true or not, my imagination is going to posit something here. You go way back to caveman times. You've got small, maybe bonded, pair bond partners having some children, but you're early Graves levels, 1 emerging 2. And there comes this time when if everybody fought for their survival as an individual, things would break down really quickly. And I think that probably extroverted feeling or harmony probably started to emerge. I don't know how this came. This is my imagination. This is philosophical. This isn't scientific, what I'm saying. This is a philosophical thought. But it's almost like extroverted feeling came on the scene. Harmony came on the scene to say, you know what? Some of us, like all of us, are going to have to take a little bit of a hit. Like, we're going to have to compromise a little bit, because I think underneath extroverted feeling or harmony, there's a sense of compromise. Like, not any one person's going to get 100% of what they want. Like, all of us are going to have to make some concessions because we're in this together as a collective. And I think harmony and extroverted feeling probably kind of philosophically came on the scene as an important function, and probably serves us still well today in helping remind us that we are connected and it's not just about us. Like, part of what we have to do is put ourselves aside for the sake of the other. And I appreciate that message too. I think that self-sacrifice is important because it allows the transactional element. I remember going through my first divorce, my first wife. My lawyer said something very important to me. He said, you don't want to get everything you want from this, and she shouldn't get everything she wants from this. The two of you should get a little bit of what you want and have to compromise on other things. I thought that's really wise, actually, Because if one of us won 100% over and it was mostly just custody stuff. It wasn't even between us. It was mostly about the kid stuff that I was concerned about. I didn't care about the financial all that stuff. I just cared about the kids. And to me, it was important that I realized it's going to be a little bit of needs over here, a little bit of needs over here. We'll both have to compromise because we have an impasse in understand seeing each other's perspective. But in order to move forward in harmony, we're going to have to take a little bit of a personal sacrificial hit on what we get out of this arrangement. So I look at that on a real micro level to pull back and go, that's probably what's happening on a societal level too, is we have to kind of and harmony helps us do this, extroverted feeling helps us do this, get a sense of how much do we have to give and take, and where is the equity of the, not transaction, but the value exchange or the reciprocation between people. And I think Effie can remind us when it's too weighted on one side. It says, hey, there's too much going to this grouping over here or these individuals over here. It needs to be spread back over here. We can't have it too lopsided. That starts to create bad dynamics in the social systems. And I think Effie's really good, extroverted feeling harmony is really good at reminding us when that kind of thing's happening. And I'm grateful for it. As much as it's hard to see it at play, I think that's where it can really shine and show up and say, wait a minute here, everybody. This is not exactly well distributed, emotion and human connection. We need to kind of figure out how to distribute this a little bit better. And I think that's really a powerful thing from the harmony process.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, because it is also the place of idea viruses and memes, the human matrix is very sensitive. Extroverted feeling or harmony is really good at understanding how to blast those idea viruses out. In order to have good extroverted feeling or harmony, it has to have well-integrated introverted thinking or accuracy. And we've talked about this in all of the podcasts about why the world needs all of this. When we talked about introverted thinking and I was an advocate for introverted thinking or accuracy, I'm pretty sure, I don't know, I was kind of channeling, but I'm pretty sure I talked about the importance of compassion and the element that extroverted feeling or harmony brings. And on the flip side, the most crucial thing that extroverted feeling or harmony can integrate from accuracy or introverted thinking is intellectual honesty, right? It has to be, it has to acknowledge that the fastest and easiest ideas to blast out to the human matrix are also going to be the simplest. And that means that they might not always be fully accurate, because introverted thinking or accuracy requires a little bit of complexity to be a complete thought. So one of the things that, if you are the person who's using harmony or extroverted feeling, one of the things you have to recognize is that a very simple thought, or let's illustrate it by saying a sound bite, is the easiest one to transfer quickly. So make sure you're
decontextualize sometimes.
Decontextualize. So make sure you're not living in the shallows. Make sure that you're not overly triggered or overly agitated by sound bites. Get good information. Even if you're not transmitting all that information, even if it's not your job to, be the person who's teaching everybody all these intricacies of concepts and thoughts and complete thoughts. That's really not your job. That's more the job of TPs, people using introverted thinking or accuracy. Your job is to get good quality information out to the matrix, which will be oversimplified, but you'll be able to do that if you're making sure that you're doing good investigation on your side. If you're just hearing sound bites and then passing sound bites along because they evoked a response in you, and you believe that the response they evoked in you should also be evoked in everybody else.
Or it will create a quick connection.
Exactly, with a group of people or culture or whatever, then you're not showing up in a way that all of us need, right? You're just allowing an idea virus, an unvetted idea virus, get out to the rest of the matrix, which may or may not be the right one. So your job isn't to teach all these complex thoughts, although you might be a person who does that. I have known people who use extroverted feeling, FJs, are sometimes amazing teachers of complex thoughts. So I'm not disqualifying that. I'm talking about in the realm of memetics and memes and idea viruses specifically. Pass things along that are vetted by your own carefulness be careful with what you get evoked by. And if you are vetting information for yourself, then you can pass things along once you have gone through some rigor on your end. So intellectual honesty is one of the ways, and integrating intellectual honesty is one of the ways that extroverted feeling or harmony becomes very powerful and extremely needed in humans. And you know this, right? As a person who's using harmony, you know that the better the information you have about the people in your life, the better you get their needs met, right? Oftentimes when I'm trying to talk to you, Joel, about something that you need, I'm like, so what is it that you want? And you're like, I don't know. I'm like, well, I can't help you get what you want unless I have more information. I'm going to need more information to be able to match you to getting your need met, or your desire or whatever. So you know that when it comes to the people in your life, this applies to humanity, right? The more we understand the challenge or the problem, the more information and data we get, the better we are. The better we are at diagnosing the problem, the better we are at actually prescribing the right prescription, actually getting the needs met. So that's just one encouragement that I would give, so that those of you who are using extroverted feeling or harmony are showing up to the world, giving us your greatest gifts. Vet things well for yourself. Do what you can to be in integrity with intellectual honesty, and then pass along what you need to pass along to ensure that all of our eyeballs and attention are on the things that we need to be prioritizing as a species.
And I just want to say to you, as an extroverted feeling person, you probably don't hear this enough, but thank you for showing up. I'm an advocate for this process. I think we both are. Thank you for showing up. I know there are things that you do that go unrecognized. I know there is emotional labor that you take on that no one sees, and you never get a reciprocal value exchange for that. Maybe no one even says thank you, and yet you did it anyway because you're compelled to. And I'm really grateful for that. I'm grateful that there's somebody that takes up things to do and takes on some of the burden for others, even if there's no gratitude to it. I think there's a lack of awareness, but when there is awareness, I think people are grateful. And I'm grateful when I have awareness, when I stop and think about the ways that harmony shows up. And there's a lot of things that just happen in the world, a lot of social interactions, a lot of ways that things are smoothed over and when there's conflict, or resolved when there's conflict, that no one ever is grateful to you as a harmony user or an extroverted feeling user. I want to say, kind of for the universe, a message in a bottle from the universe, thank you for that. And it's not just for me personally, it's almost like a gestalt thank you. And I think that as we become more aware as humans of where harmony shows up and extroverted feeling shows up, I think that there's going to be more opportunities to feel the gratitude for the things that you bring to the table.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think harmony needs a big dose of gratitude for all the stuff that goes unseen. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I will say one thing, just because it's a personal, I use introverted thinking. Like I said, I have a love-hate relationship with harmony.
This is a tough podcast for you. Not because you don't have gratitude, but because it's your 10-year-old, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you can see it in a weird way. It's a weird, interesting relationship you have with it.
Well, and you said that the person who's giving that emotional labor may not ever receive reciprocal value. I do think that there is reciprocal value. It's just never going to be in the same way. The emotional labor that extroverted feeling or harmony does, unless they're around other people who have their same talents, they're not going to receive emotional labor as well, which is probably why people who use harmony or extroverted feeling have a lot of friends who are using the same function, because they need that support structure with each other. I think that's very common. But there is reciprocal value given back. It's just not in the same sphere. And so sometimes harmony itself can be almost blind to what they're receiving back, because they're so used to people being blind to what they're giving. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so, I did this whole thing in introverted thinking. I talked about thought labor. Thought labor being that, it's not uncommon for people to send me an email and ask me what I meant in a podcast. And I'll spend time explaining what I meant in a podcast, and I'll give some concepts that they can think about, and then they'll email me back or respond back with, well, tell me what you mean by this, or tell me what this means, or tell me what the significance of this is. And I'm like, well, that's on you. You're supposed to go think about that. But then I realized, no, they need me to do that for them too. So I talked about the concept of thought labor in the Introverted Thinking podcast. And I actually do think, this is why I think TPs and FJs get along really well oftentimes. I get along with FJs like crazy. I love them. And I think a lot of times it's because I'm willing to do thought labor in exchange for the emotional labor, and they're willing to do emotional labor oftentimes in exchange for thought labor. But there is reciprocity and value exchange happening in those arenas. It's just sometimes it's so like we just are blind to what we're not providing, and we're blind to what we're receiving sometimes. And that said, I don't want to at all like take away or diminish your gestalt thank you, because I too am incredibly grateful for everything I've received from FJs in my life. And I know that I'm blind to a lot of it. I'm sure that I've had like really good ENFJ friends, and I've had really good ESFJ friends, and I know they've done a ton for me that I just never thought about and I just never thanked them for. So I think that that's a very appropriate thing to do.
So what do you think? If you've been an FJ, a Harmony Extraverted Feeling user, and you've heard us talk about this, did we miss something? Is there something we should be grateful for that we missed? I think there's a lot of stuff here with Extraverted Feeling. I'm sure we didn't hit upon all of it. But what's been your experience? Maybe you're not an Extraverted Feeling user, and some of these concepts you're like, oh yeah, I guess that is what that process would bring to the world. You guys gave me a new perspective on that. I can see more gratitude here than maybe I was able to find before, or see it in a different light, or maybe we confirm something you already thought. Come over to personalityhacker.com. Leave a comment, ask a question, share your story. Let us know how you would advocate for Extraverted Feeling, or maybe questions you have around it. We'd love to hear from you, and that's the best place to do that, directly below this podcast at personalityhacker.com. You can also join our community of like minds. We are growing different social media channels, YouTube channels. We're going to continue to expand those and have conversations going on different platforms. So come join us at whatever platform you prefer, whatever platform you're on mostly. Come and join us, follow us, like us. I'd love for you to do it on all platforms, but come find us there and be part of the discussion. Keep moving forward.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, various Android platforms, and Spotify. Joel let me know that Spotify is an important one. So also Spotify. And of course...
Say it again. Spotify.
Spotify.
Who knows? It'll be out of business in 20 years when somebody's listening back. Like, what's a Spotify?
Oh, wouldn't it be amazing if somebody was listening to this podcast in like 25 years and was like, what is Spotify? I have no idea. Hello, people of the future. I wonder what it's like there.
It would be like saying, get on Earthlink, or what are the ones in the early 90s? Like
yeah.
somebody recording something like...
It's true. Well, I just imagine that if our...
AOL, American Online.
Yeah, exactly. If our podcast survives well into the future, I'm sure they'll just chop these endings off. There's just really no reason to have anybody hear them, except for you, dear listener, who needs to go get our book as well. So subscribe to us and also get our book at any retailer, book retailer. Leave us a rating and review on Amazon, on Goodreads. Leave us a rating and review on iTunes. Just say nice things about us in all sorts of places.
See what you get? You get a to-do list when you listen to us.
Because that's really helpful to us. And if you want to do a little reciprocity, that's one of the things you can do. All right. And did I forget anything?
I don't think so.
Okay. So just do those things. Go do them. Go do them right now. I know you're driving, but pull over and go do those things.
Or running on the treadmill.
Or running on the treadmill. Make it happen. I'm kidding. You can do as you like. And if you were to do them, I would be grateful.
There you go. Sounds good.
All right.
My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker Podcast.